The Boys, 2019 series available on Amazon. So far, it has one season with 8 episodes, but it was already renewed for a second one. And it is based on a comic book and features superheroes, but rather than being a straight superhero story, it's a deconstruction of one. So there's more than a few similarities to the absolute classic that is Watchmen. There, the story was based on the premise of superheroes existing in real world, in that case of Cold War America, and having them as presented as flawed, fucked up people, in some ways products of their own environments. The Boys is based on the premise of superheroes existing in the real world of today, of corporate America, run and heavily controlled by private companies. It examines superheroes as having carefully manufactured, perfect facades designed by marketing teams and based on target demographics, while at the same time those superheroes are actually all kind of fucked up on the inside, much like in Watchmen. So, a few words about the story. In the world of The Boys, superhumans exist, and the most famous group of them all is called the Seven. They are very clearly a cynical, jaded version of Justice League, and they operate under the umbrella of Vault Corporation, a company that takes care of their public image, handles their media appearances, sells merchandise based on the heroes, and even controls their activities as heroes. At the beginning, one of the members of the Seven retires and is replaced with a new girl, Annie, nicknamed Starlight. And her youthful naivete and idealism immediately has to clash with reality. In the meantime, the actual main plot is kickstarted when Huey, a young regular guy working at an electronics store, suffers a terrible tragedy. Basically, in front of his eyes, the hero A-Train, a guy that runs really fast based on Flash, runs through his girlfriend, literally through her, and essentially just explodes her on the spot. Huey, who up until then was a fan of superheroes, is also confronted by reality when Vault basically buries the entire case and he's left without so much as an apology from A-Train. He is then approached by a man that introduces himself as Billy Butcher, who says he's out to bring the Seven and can help Huey get revenge. And clearly, there's also some history between him and the superheroes, and he's clearly very determined to bring them down. So essentially, in this story, the roles are flipped. The heroes are the villains, and the villains are the heroes. Although heroes may not be the best word in this context. Protagonists, I guess, would be better, as the titular boys are far from innocent themselves. It is a really jaded and cynical take on the superhero genre, trying to examine how much of the actual heroism would even be there if those people really existed in the capitalist, corporate driven world that we inhabit. And I think it makes its case really, really well. Partly because the story is tight and engaging, and partly because of the believable performances. I think that every single character is written and performed rather well, and each of them feels fleshed out and real. There are no one-dimensional people here. Really, everyone has layers to them. The two standout performances for me are Carl Urban as Billy Butcher. He's just a massively charismatic presence in the series, carrying the momentum of the plot. And Anthony Starr as Homelander, the leader of the Seven, who is essentially a psychopathic version of Superman. I think he steals every scene he's in. He has this surface level charm and the ability to seem likable. But we learn very soon that underneath all of that, there is a fucking monster lurking. And because we and the other characters know he's essentially invincible and can kill anyone else in a split second, the tension that he manages to create just by being there is palpable. I think Huey and Annie are also done well as they coincidentally meet and begin to know each other while being essentially on opposite sides of the conflict. They really carry the emotional center of the series, which is needed because all of the rest is so ruthless. There is a criticism of corporations here, of Christianity in America, as also presented as a business, of politics and the hypocrisy that comes with it. There's a touch on sexual harassment and people trafficking. And let me be clear, the series does not pull its punches. It's quite brutal in its worldview. And that goes both purely for the storyline and for the visual side of things. There are some gory, violent scenes in here, some awful deaths and disturbing imagery. There also is quite a bit of humor to balance all of that out, and the boys have this great banter-centered chemistry between them, and there's a fair bit of poking fun at superhero tropes as well. In particular, a hero called the Deep, who is this universe's Aquaman, he's just a punching bag for jokes, and they just keep escalating from episode to episode. And in fact, I think in that regard, the series may even have overdone it just a little bit, because what I initially thought was downright hilarious began to get quite repetitive as time went on, and that's a bit of a wider problem, I think, with the series. In my opinion, it starts out really strong and keeps going until about the last two episodes, where it gets a bit weaker. It seemed to me like the story was at the same time rushed to get to the end, to the finish line, but also at the same time cut short at a really weird moment in the plot. Rushed because while the previous six episodes do have solid pacing, and they're definitely not boring, they let the story breathe and the characters. They take their time building stuff up. And then 7 and 8 just move faster, and it creates this contrast with everything that came before. But also in regards to the series being cut short, because the series ends on a cliffhanger, and not just with the main storyline. Pretty much every single subplot and character is left at a point that feels like the middle of a scene, essentially. I mean, okay, fine, we're getting a second season, so they had to leave something for that. But I can't help but feel that this one was almost a full episode too short. There's zero sense of closure when it ends, and I'm of the opinion that even if a series goes to multiple seasons and wants to leave some hooks for hooks in the final episode for the future, there should be some sense of an ending to make the season feel like a complete thing. I think a good example here would be Stranger Things or Legion. Both of those series went on for multiple seasons, and in both cases, the last episodes of each of those seasons has this promise of more to come. But there is also an ending to the plot of that particular season. So you feel like, okay, there will be more, but this chapter is over and done. And The Boys just feels like a hard cut in the middle of a scene, in the middle of an episode. And that to me brings it down a little bit from being an excellent series to just a very good one. Because it does leave me with a bit disappointed towards the end. But on the other hand, I also have to be fair toward it and appreciate how fantastic it was for the majority of the season. So I'd still very much recommend seeing it to pretty much anyone, and even more so if you like superheroes in general and want something new and fresh in the genre. It's really solid, both as a deconstruction of the superhero genre and also just as a standalone piece of entertainment.